So any final questions, Doug, before I switch it over to Nicole?
Well, just since you started recording, can you one more time demonstrate manually adding a row in Beekeeper?
In Beekeeper, sure. So what we did is in Beekeeper, there is a little plus icon hiding out down here. It's never a bad idea to hit refresh before that, just to make sure that your table's up to date for the right columns. And then if you hit the plus down here, you can ignore the ID because that will be auto-generated. But then in the name, you can do Trader Joe's, and the URL, let's just say, is traderjoes.com. I know that's going to be a different URL, but and then in the created at, instead of actually typing in the timestamp, you can use a shortcut and say now, and the parentheses in SQL will know that we want to actually pull the timestamp from the server timestamp. We don't actually want to put in the words now. And then the same goes for the updated at. So when you click off of this, you think it's done, but what's really happening is it's queuing it up to run when you hit the apply button down here. So if you see this in green, it's like pending to be inserted. It's not actually inserted yet. So then when you hit apply, now it actually inserted it and generated the ID for it and all of that stuff. So then over in our SQLize, we have our get stores endpoint that is using the store model to do a find all query on that. So this is saying whenever we do a get request to stores, go use the model, find all of them, wait for the query to be done, and then send it back in the response. So after all of that, if we switch over to Postman and do a get to our stores and hit send, we're not only going to get our Wegmans and Tops, but we now have Trader Joe's down here.
Excellent. Thank you.
No problem.
And that's the back end though, right? Like,
this
that's
is
the
all
back
back end. Yep, we didn't touch
okay.
anything on the front end.
Okay.
If we were on
Over to
the
you,
front
Nicole.
end, we would do a fetch on the front end. We would get the data back from the fetch, parse out the JSON, and then if we're in React, we would set state, and the set state would make it show up in the HTML.
Nice. These last couple of days, I've been having so many light bulb moments.
Good. Share them. Share them when you have them. That is what is rewarding for me, is like, I could care less about what I'm teaching you. I want to make sure what I'm teaching you is actually triggering the light bulb.
I think because I was thinking about how it all connected, and now I'm starting to see how everything connects and where it goes and how it goes. Like,
so
now I can decipher what the back end looks like from the front end.
I'll give you two options, Nicole. I can either just answer any questions you have or where you're stuck or any homework, or I can literally kind of pull up where we left off in class and like create a new model and see end to end how that data shows up.
What time do we end? You at 11?
I can go until 11:30.
Okay, so I say we do that, and then
Okay.
I could just show. I only had a nav bar problem, so
Okay.
just like a quick fix.
So let me pull up. I'm going to start with where we're at in.
And we're still having office hours tomorrow, right?
Office hours tomorrow at 5 is still on. Yes.
Okay.
And then in the future, I will probably offer to do office hours in person, but hybrid, so that you can still join remotely. And then not next week, but the following week, I'm going to be in person Monday through Thursday, just as classes kind of ramping up and we get to capstones. And eventually we're going to get next week, maybe our last week, that we do like 3 hours of class. And so we'll get to the point where it's like, half the class will just be working session on capstone, and the other half will be, you know, hey, let's reiterate these concepts, or, you know, here's something that everyone seems to be struggling with. Let's do an exercise. So we'll see how that goes. But next week may be our last week of 3 hour classes. And then the following week will probably be more of like half of classes for capstone. The other half is for reiterating concepts and stuff like that. but that's all kind of tentative. All I know is that we'll switch to, after this week, doing office hours in person, and also have more in-person classes for the people who want to be in person. But with that said, let me switch over. I'm going to share my screen. And so this is chat. I don't want to be in chat. I want to be in blog. So what we're going to do in blog is we start in the front end, right? So I'm going to just nuke out the stuff that's already in here. And in the front end, I'm going to say, all right, I want to go get all of my posts, let's say. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a import use effect from React, because we want to get the posts when the page first loads. So we say, oh, and we also are going to need a use state. So we say const posts set posts equals a use state, and we're going to do this in class next week. And we're going to say use.
So can I follow along? Can I follow along?
If you want to, I would suggest, though, that you wait until we do it in class.
Okay.
With that said, I would say if like, interrupt me if you don't understand what we're doing or why we're doing it. So basically, to get started, we say, hey, when the page first loads, we want to do something, and we do that with the use effect from React. Then we say, hey, we want to do a thing called get posts, which is an asynchronous function because it's coming from the backend. So then we say, all right, actually go get the posts. Now we have to do the fetch. So we say const response equals await the fetch to our backend. Where we go get the posts. Now we wait here because, like, this doesn't exist in our backend, right? Like, we haven't told it what that route looks like. So now we switch over to our backend and we say server.get posts. And now we have to tell the backend, hey, how do we get the posts? So we're going to send back our posts, but our posts don't exist yet, right? We haven't said, what do the posts look like in the database? So we go over, we make a new file called post.js. And in our post, we're going to kind of copy everything that's going on in the user. So we're going to say it's a post, it has an ID, and let's just say it's got some content. That is a data type .text. So now this is SQLized. This is the bridge between our database and the JavaScript code, right? So the whole point of the model is to say, this is what it's going to look like in the database. So in our db.js, we say const post equals require a post, and pass it the database connection information. And then we export the post down here so we can use it in other places.
So Max?
Yeah.
A model like post or user, it's basically a model of a row in the database?
A model of the table that the row will go into in the database.
Right, it's a model of a row in the table.
Correct.
Okay.
So now if we go to Beekeeper, because we set up our post, when I connect and make sure my server is running, now I've got my posts in here and I've got my ID and my content. This ID and content of the table literally came right from my content and my ID right here.
So I fully understand that. So can I look at your user.js? Because this is the code that I reviewed to make sure I understand where we're at.
Yeah.
And So I thought you only would do the JS unless it was like something like a user. Like I didn't know you would have to do it for like a get or a post. Like,
Well,
why
so-
are you doing that?
Yeah, let's keep going on this example because I think it's going to make sense to you in 1 second. So
Oh, okay.
we can get all of our posts by saying, hey, if we come in here and we create a post if we pull in the post from the database, what we can do is say like, hey, our posts, go to the post model and find all of them. So if we go to our app.js and deal with that, so we say const data equals await our response dot JSON, and then let's like console log our data dot posts and npm run start. So if we look in our console in our React app, it's an empty array. There's nothing in it. Well, of course, there's nothing in it. We didn't create a new post. So we could create an endpoint to create a new post, which we'll do in class. But let's use that trick that we just learned. Let's create a new one where the content is like my first post. If I and make this now and now. Oh, come on, Max. Okay, now that's in the database. If I go back to my front end and refresh, now I've got my first post in here. So
It's ID that too. Why?
Good question. Because one, I guess, was already created at some point. If we do a new one, that's actually a really good question. I don't know where one went. My second post.
Probably that first one you tried to do and it just disappeared.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
you're right.
Maybe the failed attempt.
Yeah. Okay, so now we've got 2 posts, and if I refresh, you can see both of them. So Nicole, this is where you had your light bulb moment. If we take this and instead of console logging it, we set the posts in here into the state. Now we just need to tell it to use the state. So we're gonna say posts.map, go loop over each one of them, get each individual post out, and when you get the post, return a p tag with the key being the post.id, and we're going to say the post.content should show up from that. So we come over here, my first post, my second post.
Oh, okay, so I see. All right, can you go back to the code so I can reiterate where I see? So
Yeah, go for it.
yeah, so the return is basically coming from the beekeeper and all the contents that were in the beekeeper. So now we can finally pull it as like the return. We're returning it to the front end.
Yes. And we kind of need to run it. We need to make an endpoint in our API to use the model, which is using Beekeeper. And the API basically becomes a pass-through, right? It's literally getting it from the database, handing it off to the API. The API is handing it off to the fetch, and then we're parsing the data out here to get rid of the JSON stuff. Then we finally have the data in our front end, so we hand it into the state up here, and then we use the state down here to make it show up.
Where's the parse? How come it's not stringified? Or like which
we
ones?
use stringify to send the data into the back end, but then we use .json to reverse it. So this .json method is what's parsing it.
Okay, got it.
Which that's confusing because .json converts it from JSON
to an actual object. Yes.
I just remember it as like the opposite. Like if it's not the one, it's the other.
Yeah. So like if we needed to send data in here, like with the body, this is when we would do a JSON.stringify, and we would say like where the post name is like blarg. So this is where we use stringify. When we need to take an object and make it into JSON so that we can send it to the server, we stringify it. When we do it in reverse, we use the .json method, which is using .parse behind the scenes. Actually wonder, will it show me? No, it won't show me that. I'm just going to comment this out because we aren't actually using it, but that's where we would use stringify. Helpful?
Yeah, it's like I can like from function. I know the function. I can read it just like that. I just gotta work up the confidence to type it out.
It takes time, right? And Doug had a light bulb moment this week where he was like, I know how to do all of this. Like I can go to a project that we did in class and look at how we did it there. And if I can do it there, I can do it in my capstone, right? And that's like, it seems like such an obvious statement, but then when you actually go and do it, you're like, I know this. Like, this isn't just me being drug along in class. Like, I actually understand this, or I can use some other place to make it work, right? So that is all programming is. I mean, there are things that I can do for like, oh, let's go make a new model. But then you saw me, I couldn't make the post model from scratch. I went to user and copied the whole user and reused all of that stuff, right? Like I don't have the model memorized. I've been using Sequelize for 5 years now. I can't make a model from scratch without either going to the documentation or going to another project and using that, you know, I already did. So like, that is something where like, I'm not kidding you. This is literally, I've got the documentation up. What you don't see is my third monitor in class where I'm actually having all this stuff up that I'm referencing, right? Like I either have the docs up or I have some other project where I did this already up, and that's what I'm going off of. So I don't want you to think like, oh, Max is some superhuman who has all of this memorized. I can do examples like this off the fly, but I can't create a model from scratch over here. I literally had to go into my user model and use it. And how did I make user from scratch? I went to the documentation and I saw, oh, this is how they make a model, and I need to, you know, sequelize.define. Oh, and sequelize.sync, we use that. And, you know, Doug, I showed you force true. That's literally coming right from the docs, you know.
So I know this might sound like a dumb question, but I'm gonna ask it anyways. So all the code that you just wrote, right? That is considered React. Straight up React and JavaScript.
Everything I wrote in the front end, all of this code is considered React.
Okay.
Right. And now this fetch that we're doing, that's like vanilla JavaScript, right? That's like JavaScript that's built in. And then all of the code over here is all considered, it's still JavaScript, just like the front end is, but this is considered Node and Express.
Okay. Because I was stuck.
Everything like this post find all, still JavaScript, but now that's JavaScript coming from Sequelize.
Okay.
And then Sequelize is what is doing the Postgres stuff, which is running the SQL in the background, which is what we can see back here. So you can say this is related to SQL. It isn't SQL itself because we didn't write like select star from whatever, but this code here is running SQL code for us.
So it's just like a bunch of different syntaxes from different things all into one.
And that is what full stack is.
Okay, because now
the front end is React, the back end is Node and Express, and then the other part of the back end is the database, which is SQL and Postgres. Now, you can pick and choose on your stack. So you could say my front end is React, that's still JavaScript, but my back end is Python. And and you can swap things out there. We could rebuild this whole server.js in Python if we wanted to. And now we would be using Python syntax, but would accomplish the exact same thing because it's all JSON getting sent back and forth between the front end and the back end.
That makes so much sense. Do you have anything else to say, Doug? Because I'm going to keep going.
No, keep going, keep going.
Okay, so in my head, okay, so I already scrapped one of my capstones from just CSS, HTML, and all the basics to try to make a React one, and I think that's where I was stuck. So now I understand what it exactly is supposed to go into. I understand that, but do I need to stop and make a back end and a front end?
Yes.
Or do I need to?
Well,
okay,
you can.
So I need to start over.
No. You
before
can
I
keep
get-
going
okay.
on your front end. If you've got a
Okay.
front end in React, don't scrap that. Leave that as is. There's nothing different that you need to do in your front end once you have a back end. I mean, you don't need to scrap it. That's what I'm trying to say, is that you're going to need to add in fetch, and you're going to need to use state, and you're going to need to do all of that stuff. But using state doesn't make any sense until you've got data, right? And you aren't going to be able to get that data until you've got your back end. And once you get your API set up, you're going to be like, well, the data isn't going in the back end itself. It's not going in the API itself. It's going in the database. So I need to set up SQLize, and I need to get Beekeeper working, and I need to get the data in the database. Then I can make it flow from the database to my API, and then from my API to my React front end, and then from React into state, and then from state to actually showing up.
I'm just getting so excited.
Again, this is my favorite part. The last quarter of the class is my favorite because it's like, be free, go write your JavaScript. I've taught you everything I need to teach you, like start using it all. And we're finally at that point where you're like, which is so hard for the capstone because we want to track your progress throughout the whole thing. But at the same time, like, you don't know enough about the database or the API or any of that stuff until today, right? Until week 17 or whatever it is. And now at week 17, it's like, I can do all of that. Like I can put the data over here and I can get it going through the API and I can make it show up in my React, right? And that's why at this point, it's like continuing to teach you stuff is like, stop teaching me things. I want to go do this. I want to go make it work at my capstone. And so that's why we try and shift class at this point to like give you the time to do that, but also have the support of being able to ask the questions and, say I'm stuck here, or get halfway through it and be like, okay, I thought I get this. I don't get this. I don't understand how state's working, right? And at that point we can say, okay, great. That's what we want to spend the first half of class on, is going over to state and making sure you're making it all click.
I basically told Mel, I was like, hey, I don't want no help, just read this code to me. And I literally took notes off of him and what he, said. And I found another code, which is our recent one, and we worked the front and back end, and I tried to read it off to him. He said, no, this is where you're messing up. Just saying, like, clarifying, the word, this is what a function is. Like, I know what a function is, but maybe I didn't realize like how it was working. So I would say like, that was really beneficial to me. And I feel like I see everything clearly again, which I haven't for a little while. So I'm really excited to like move forward.
Awesome. And we're gonna try and ramp up the frequency of that in class, right? Because at this point, it isn't a matter of I need to teach you more things. It's a matter of what are you struggling with? Let's figure out how to get you to understand it, right? And I know I keep saying this, but if you're not getting it, other students probably aren't getting it as well, right? So it is 10 times more beneficial for you to ask the questions and have the time in class, right? Like right now in class, this next week, we've got to get through the blog project, because the blog project is the last chance to say, here's everything, right? Like let's have the one gold standard of this working. And so that when you are working on your capstone and you need an example of something, you can go to blog project. But literally next week is the last week where we're going to spend 3 hours just hardcore coding, because after that, it's still 3 hours of coding, but it's going to be an hour-ish of, hey, let's go over questions that you had. And then the rest of class is going to be go work on your capstone. And when something comes up, let's work on that. And if I come and you go, oh, I'm stuck at this one spot. And I go, this is a good example for the whole class. We'll go make it work for the whole class. If not, we'll just go in a breakout room and figure it out.
Perfect. Can I show my nav bar?
Yeah, go for it.
I think it's just full of HTML. That's why I'm like.
Nav bars are, I think, one of the hardest things to do in HTML. I think header. Yeah, there you go. And then npm run start for me so I can just see what's going on. Okay, and I'm guessing you just want to get the register button over on the right. Okay, so go back to your code.
Both the login and the register all the way on the other side.
Okay. So I don't, let me remote control because this is one that I'm like,
okay.
There's not a.
Okay, if it gets too loud, just unmute it.
Okay, yeah. I think there's a keyboard shortcut. Command Shift A is mute, Nicole. So if you want to mute yourself while I'm working, you can Command Shift A and it should mute you. Okay, so I don't love this container in here. You normally only want to have like one container for the page. So I'm guessing this is part of the problem, but it's not the problem. So this div is closing out this div. This is all part of your collapse like it should be. So if we go over, that didn't fix anything, but there should be a navbar class that we can add. So let me just go to the docs. I'm doing this on my other monitor just so you don't think I'm crazy. Well, if you don't think I'm crazy, you're crazy yourself. But let's see. Deflex. UL collapse. Mention text. So what they do is inside the container, inside the nav bar, they do a deflex here. Deflex. And then they do that outside the collapse. And your collapse doesn't end until down here. Is it command? No. What's the prettier shortcut? Format code, BS code.
Is it Option Shift F?
I also wanted to say, like, yeah, what's proper indentation? Like, should I watch a video on that? On like React or JavaScript?
This is just HTML indentation. Is there a reason you don't have prettier on? Do you not like prettier?
No, it's on. If you look at the, I can see it from here. It's double checked at the bottom.
No, so you see how this indentation is wrong? If prettier were on, it would have fixed the indentation for you. So if we go to settings and then do a format on save, this is disabled. So if we check that and then come back over to header, and if your indentation is right, now it just did all of your indentation for you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I assumed that it was already on.
No, so it was installed, but because you didn't have format on save set, it wasn't actually running it to format it. So some people
okay.
don't like prettier, and that's okay. Like,
No, I do.
okay. So now this should make it much easier for me to say like, oh, like all your divs were right, but now it's much easier to say like, oh, this is in a row, and I think that's what's causing your problem.
Right.
So
Hello.
collapse nav item. Yeah, so I don't think you need this row. So I'm just going to take that out and this out. Aha. Okay.
It's loud. Here, I'm in a meeting, guys. But so now
I can't hear
please
any of your
just-
background noise, so
Oh,
it's
really?
probably
Oh,
more
great.
distracting for you than it is for us.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Can you go back to the code? So, because I was convinced that I had to do like have the numbers on my div. So like a column or a row like on these, right?
So
So do you think
you're not wrong. Whenever you're making your own content, it's a good idea to think in a grid, but because nav bars are so complicated in terms of how they show up and how they collapse on like a smaller screen, it's best to stick with the bootstrap code. So instead of when you're using someone else's component, it's normally better not to use your own row system, but instead to use their example code. So let me show you how I figured that out. I'm going to just go over here and I'm going to go to Bootstrap. So what I did is I looked at their nav bar, right? Which is, I know where you started with everything. But I looked at their search is over on the right part of the screen. And so what I did is I said, okay, where is their search showing up here? And I saw that there was a deflex on it. So I added the deflex. And then the other part of it is I said, okay, what part, where does this form show up? And do they have a row? And so because I knew, and I think there's a better example down here of the search being on the right. Maybe not. Yeah. Okay. Here's search on the right. So they've got a deflex in here, and I noticed they don't have any rows. And so that's when I went, oh, if they can get it on the right without a row, we should get it on the right without a row. And I use this example to get it over there. With that said, nav is, like I said, one of the most complicated things you can do in HTML. So like your gut wasn't wrong in using a row and a column, but whenever you use someone else's like pre-built component, it's best to use their code instead of trying to use your code to get it over there.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I've got 5 minutes before I've got to hop. Any questions from either of you that I can answer? I feel like we got a lot of light bulb moments in this like past hour and a half.
No,
Yeah, no.
we'll let you go 4 minutes early.
Cool. I will see you guys at office hours tomorrow at 5. That will be all virtual. And then next week will be all virtual. And then the office hours for the following week, I will try and do in person, and we'll pull on that as well to make sure that, we get a time, whether it's Friday at 6 or Saturday morning or Sunday morning. We'll figure out what works best for everyone.
Okay, perfect. But Doug, did you have
Okay.
anything to say? I didn't want you to leave. Okay, and the other thing is, our exact graduation is at 5 o'clock or 5:30 on September 8th.
It's probably the students should be there at 5 or 5:30. I don't know the exact time. And then we'll probably start at 6. But we just have everyone show up like a half hour early, get set up, make sure they know the space, all of that. It will be in the same room that we did kickoff at. But I would say pencil in 5 o'clock in your calendar just to play it safe. And then we'll have more details for you as it gets closer.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
No
You guys
problem.
have a good weekend. All right,
I'll see you
bye.
guys.
Have
See
a
you
good day.
tomorrow.